Everyone has a bright light inside of them that deserves to be seen by the world. That's why it's time to shine the light on the extraordinary who are accomplishing phenomenal things. This is the Shine Out Loud Show with Lillian Obogo.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Yes, you know those words because it is I, Lillian Obogo of the Shine Out Loud Show. And yes, we are back. We're doing some new things and it's 2020. It's been a year and a half already in just 6 months. So we've had COVID. We've had so much upheavals in 1 year that it seems impossible. But, you know, a lot of us are saying, well, we should cancel 2020. And a lot of us are saying, well, you know what? 2020 is the year of ultimate growth and show up. And in the quest of that, Shine Out Loud Show is back. We are back doing what it is we know how to do, and which is shining the light on the incredible men and women who do incredible things in our community that we should know about. So join me today as I have a brand new guest who is an incredibly multi-talented, multi-accredited woman. In fact, I'm just tired of having to tell you just how incredible this woman is. But you know me, I get really excited when I get to interview and talk to women like her. So join me and welcome Jane Egerton-Idehen. Jane, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Did I get it right?
Jane Egerton-Idehen, you did try. That's a good one.
So,
pleasure to be on the show.
It's so good to have you. You know, I'm glad that you could join us today because I found out about you through another podcast and he was singing your praises that I must interview you. And I was like, okay, let me find out about this woman. And then I find out that you have 17 years experience in Nigeria, Liberia, Ghana, in the telecommunication industry, which is male dominated first and foremost. You have a degree in engineering. You have an MBA from Warwick University, and then you hold a degree from Harvard Business School and Yale School of Management. So let's talk. Let's go with that first because we're like, that's a lot. How did you transition from engineering to business? What was the transitional line for that?
I can always place it at one moment in time. You know, we're talking about, you know, like you said earlier, 2020 could be challenging, but sometimes these are tipping points. These are transition points. And you don't pay attention. If you don't pay attention, then you don't see what it has to offer.
Yes.
Sometime in I think it's like 2003, in the early 2000s, just the beginning of my career. So right. I was this young, passionate engineer, you know, really seeing myself going in the technical domain, you know, being someone top up there, technical. I was in a phase in my career where I didn't have a lot of workload. I was kind of bored. You know, one of those cases you're bored in the office.
Right.
And nothing much is happening. And someone had come to me in the office to say, we have a project. We have to do the project, but we don't want to do the project because we don't, you know, it hasn't been successful in other countries where it's been done. Right. But the head office is insisting we have to do it. We just want to tick the box. Can you help us? We see you're very passionate. And he gave me a disclaimer, by the way, there is no promotion, no pay increase, nothing is tied to it. We just want someone to do it. And I remember my colleagues laughing. I'm like, why do you want to do that? You know, like, they've already told you there's nothing to gain from it. I'm like, I'm bored. I'll learn. It's something new. Nobody has done it in the country, so let's try it. So I took on that project and threw everything I had, you know, on it.
Right.
And it became successful. So normally when a project is successful, that means the client wants to move on with the project to like a commercial phase. We normally will hold a little party, like a cocktail party with the client to celebrate. So we're in this little, like a restaurant. We're having a cocktail party with, you know, lots of staff from the client.
Right.
Hanging out. Then the head of the unit where I ran that project internally, he came up to me and is like, Jane, I want you to come and be a sales manager. Come work for me. So I like laughed it up. I'm like, oh, Peter, you're holding a beer. It's Friday. We're all laughing. Tell me that on Monday. I'll take you seriously. I thought it was a joke. For me, it was like, he's happy. He's just trying to appreciate the hard work. He's like, no. You know everybody in this room. I said, yes, because I run the projects. I get to know everyone in the room.
Yeah.
he saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. At that time, my focus was here, and this guy saw me and thought, wow, she's so talented at doing this. She can easily connect with people. She works so well managing these kinds of projects. So that's how he started. He showed up in my office on Monday. Seriously, like, you're going. Oh my, I thought that was a joke. So a lot of convincing, talking to people, sitting with mentors. But that started my journey on the sales track into management. And I tell people in life, sometimes these transitions are not planned, but you need to pay attention. You're not always fully aware of your skills. And I talk about that in my book, Self-Awareness. You're on a journey. Learn to listen, pay attention. Because even if not for that guy telling me, I didn't know I had that skill set.
Yeah.
I'm doing this project and I just wanted to be successful. I need to talk to anybody and anyone that is involved that will become a criteria to make it successful. So I was so interested to learn, to solve the problems. I was showing up everywhere and anywhere that required me for that project. But I didn't know what I was doing, in terms of what would be the outcome.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I love the serendipity of that. So from saying yes to a project that everybody's like, well, there's nothing in it for you, to somebody having a conversation at a celebration, then saying, I want you to work for me. You're like, yeah, it's not, you're just kidding. And then they turn up on Monday like, all right, let's do this. Let's make this work.
Then you know that this is different. Like, they're not kidding. This is not someone trying to pull a fast one.
Exactly.
So that put me on a journey, because I remember at that point, when I moved into sales, I realized I didn't know what they were talking about. What is, net sales, profitability, TCO, return on investment, like throwing all this jazz. None of these things, I'm not aware. So I spoke to a couple of people, some of my mentors, and like, you know what, you need to acquire the skill set. There are different ways to acquire it. But that started me on my phase of going to do an MBA. So that's the reason I actually went to Warwick.
Okay.
So acquire the tool sets that will help you be effective in that role.
Okay.
That phase.
And that's crucial. And we'll come back to that idea of actually going out and actively acquiring skills, because we think we get to a point that I'm good. So we will come back to that point, because people know you as this telecommunication executive. People know you as the author of Fearless. People know you as the founder of Women in Career. People know you as so many different things. But my question to you, Jane, who are you without your titles?
Without all the titles?
Yes.
Someone that's passionate to learn from life and to give my best. I always say that my intention has always been to create a positive influence in my community, and that's still the driving force at my core for whatever I do. It could be a project on STEM, or it could be doing work as an engineer or someone in management, or doing something leadership, or just doing a non-profit or volunteer work. But at the core of it, I really want to positively influence my environment, because I think that's the biggest gift, to give back. Every day, our gratitude for being on earth is to give back, because I believe everybody has a reason why they're here. So What do you want to, Oprah would say, is that you want to leave people's presence and ensure that they felt really good that they met you. Learned something, or they had something, or they had a good conversation, but you want to rub off on them positively. That's me at the core. That's me with my hair, that's me.
I absolutely love that, because at the core, the titles are one thing, but your passion shines through. It shines through with everything that you do. And so I love your social content, because I've been going through your social media content, and you were on the Motivational Monday podcast recently, and you were talking about the table and the importance of women being at the table. And we keep talking about the table. So I'm going to ask you a two-part question. What does a seat at the table look like for you? That's the first part. And then I'll let you answer that, and I'll come to the second part.
So for me, a seat at the table means being at very senior leadership levels where decisions that affect a sector and industry are taken. Because at the end of the day, yes, we would, the strategy bottom up and, top down. But top down sometimes could be so impactful, because the decisions will end up affecting everybody at the bottom. And sometimes they have no influence over it. So the table is normally the influential place. The place is where we derive the strategy, for others. And what I've realized, growing up, because, initially, and I would say sometimes I felt guilty. Why do you want this? Why do you want to do this? I remember my son asking me once, why do you want to be a CEO? Like, we're happy, you're happy. Why do you want to be a CEO? And I told him, I said, because if I'm a CEO, everybody under me that is having a challenge that can bring it to me, I would ensure that we do something positive about it. So it won't be, because ultimately the buck stops at you. So you don't need to pass the buck to somebody else. You need to ensure that, especially those that are minorities or that haven't been heard, because you've been on that journey, you can speak on behalf of them. And sometimes those are issues that have never been discussed. Maybe they're too uncomfortable to have or too controversial, But because you're comfortable to do that, you set the tone. So for me, that's a seat at the table. Whatever, And for different people, it's different things, And I was saying that to a younger girl. We were having a conversation. And I'm like, you don't have to be waiting to be some senior management staff. A seat at the table could just be you with other students in school, realizing that how we're treating this segment of the group is not right. They don't have a representation. They're not being heard. And they're having challenges. And you having the guts to speak up and say, we need to have someone like this on the table. You need to hear the challenges they're having. We don't have anybody here that can really channel that. And that for you could be a seat at the table, and it's okay.
And that's actually crucial, because there's this whole thing about thinking the seat at a table is only within the corporate space. And I think exactly for women, we've been told it's in that corporate space, or we must be at a seat of that table. And it actually can actually be in our personal space. It can be in where we volunteer. It can be in our own homes. It can be, we have this
media platforms. That's
yeah, exactly. So here's my second part of that question. So my second part of that question is, what are the top 3 skills that women need to cultivate today in the very uncertain 2020 that we need to actually keep ourselves in great shape to be on that seat?
Definitely to be on the seat. I think, I don't know if I could call it, a skill, but I think you need to be courageous. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I know courageous could be seen to be macho, strong, go for it. I love Brené Brown's definition of courageous. You can't have courage without vulnerability. Mm-hmm. It means you showing up, even when you don't know what the outcomes are. So it's going to be risky. You don't know probably the outcome. You have no control of the outcome, but you choose to do it. So being visible or showing up for me is courage. And I think women need that. You know how it has been the only person in the office. And each time you try to speak up, you actually pull yourself down by telling yourself, they've all said it all. Mm-hmm. People are repeating what you've said, so nobody gives you a voice. Or you find out in meetings, nobody gives you a chance or gives the females a chance. A seat at the table, one of the skills I'm talking about being courageous means being uncomfortable, but still saying it. Maybe going to your boss or whoever is the convener for the meeting. I'm like, next time I think we should give maybe Mary and Joy and Faith a chance to speak. I notice most times, because they're not loud enough, most people just speak over them. I think it is what, considering that we give people a chance to speak at the meeting or to re-echo their voices if we feel they're being drowned out. We need to hear from them. It's very uncomfortable because, first of all, people think that strong with you now. Are you trying to say we are divided in this office? It could play around differently. So you don't have any control of those outcomes. You don't know if your boss or the convener will take it lightly or they'll take it differently, but you still go ahead and do it. For me, that is courage. And you need that. Women need that. It won't work if you don't have it. Some of the things I talk about, I did, even in the book, are things I was really scared doing. Like, it's putting yourself out there, knowing that you're putting out love, you're putting out courage, you're speaking up. Doesn't mean people are going to accept it. They might not like you. They might not
that there's no guarantee.
You have to go with it, But you still do it anyway because you know it's the right thing to do. So that for me is key. Another one is grit. I say that because I have also struggled, like, trying to understand grit. But I know a lot of people that have been successful, if you check the track record, there's an amount of grit in it. To persist, resilience, to showing up, even when the odds are against you, even when it's tough. Sometimes we show up, but when it's tough, everybody just like, let's go. This thing isn't working, But that doesn't give you your outcome. Sometimes
no, it doesn't.
Your outcome is your ability to persist in the tough times. And sometimes it could just be basic things like doing routine things that don't matter, that are boring, especially those of us that don't like boring stuff. But those boring stuff, you do them repeatedly, you get better, you form good habits, they make you successful. It could just be basic things like every day I want to invest in myself, some personal development, I want to read. I read a book a week. Like nobody sees you, nobody's going to applaud you. You're doing that for yourself, you're invested. But you're becoming a better person. It's boring, but you can tell me after like 5-10 years, even when you speak, people are like, where do you get all that wisdom from? You're so wise. Where did you hear from this or that? And you say, oh, I read it from a book. So for me, grit, that's how I see grit, really persistent. And it's important for women, see what is happening now with the whole COVID and all that. Listen. It's so easy to feel like the world is going to end and you don't want to get up from your bed. And I think that's the easy way out. It's tougher to show up every day and keep the routine and say, yes, I will still do my work. Yes, I will still plan for the future. Yes, I will still invest in myself. And that's great. And that's great. You go at it. So these two are definitely important. And self-awareness, I say that a lot. And I say that I think being a woman, I sometimes see that is a bit lacking, because we're so much out there. We don't want to be in there. And we're so powerful being in there. I found it that because at the time I was really studying leaders. I really wanted to understand the whole concept of leadership.
Okay.
What makes someone a leader? And
what did you find?
One of the things I found, a lot of things, but one of them I found about very strong leaders is self-awareness. It requires you to be vulnerable as well. To look yourself in the mirror and say, Jane, this is you. You're good at this, you're not good at this. Jane, you did this yesterday. That wasn't really the good Jane. I think we should do better. Your ability to reflect, your ability to be the one to almost like manage your own self.
Yes.
Because you're managing your emotions, you're managing so many things about yourself against your core values. Because when we say this, it don't mean you're perfect, but your ability to take that risk and always be the one to ensure that you're walking on the right path. And I think it's powerful because as you go up the ladder, there are very few people that hold you accountable. Most people, maybe out of fear of authority or whatever, nobody there are very few people that will look you in the face and say, Jane, you made a mess here. You did a wrong decision.
You can see what's happening in governments in the world, and I'm not going to pinpoint anyone right now, but you can see what's happening in certain governments where there's no accountability.
Especially with some personality types.
Exactly. We won't say the narcissist word.
You're okay, you're right. But of course, when you make the wrong mistakes and it actually, you find yourself in a ditch, they're all going to run away.
Mm-hmm.
So leaders, I found out, are those that can really self-reflect, take time out to be really aware, manage their emotions, manage so many things about themselves that they can actually auto-correct themselves.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean every time you do that at the right time. You could have made that wrong decision. But you know what? It takes courage to go back to your staff and apologize and say, I don't think I handled that situation well yesterday. I wanted to apologize to you and tell you this is what I'm thinking about. How can we work together to make that happen? How do you think that staff will feel?
They'll feel valued. They'll feel appreciated. They'll feel loyalty. They will actually feel committed to the company.
Bosses or leaders they would admire.
Yes.
A lot of courage to do that.
Of course.
Because you are the more, in terms of the power range, you're the more powerful one.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to do that. And everybody will, call you like, she's the boss, she's the leader, it's okay. But to go and say you're sorry, to go and admit wrong, to go and admit that you're not perfect and you want to change things.
It's the humility of being able to say, can I be honest with myself and with others? It takes humility to be a leader. It takes like you said, that self-awareness. So I think those are great skills that we need to cultivate, and especially the grit. And I wanted to add to that because you talked about courage. And there's this, like you said, the misnomer that courage is about that physicalness. But it takes courage for us to even sometimes be in spaces that we feel this space is unwelcoming to us. It takes courage to do that. And so sometimes we discount where we are courageous, looking for areas where, where we have defined courage to mean one thing above another.
Showing up confident, showing up assertive.
But the fact that you showed up is half the battle.
And that's important. It speaks volume, just the fact that you showed up. It does speak volume.
Yeah, and that's very powerful. So we know that you're an executive, you are climbing that corporate ladder, but on the same vein, you're an entrepreneur, and you are inspiring generations of entrepreneurs behind you. Now, let me ask you this, as someone who is grown your executive career at the same time being a business owner, why is this important to your life?
Well, initially I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. My parents were actually, but I just felt like, because I watched their journey, I thought it was too difficult. I don't want to do that. I just want to get a job and get paid, and that is okay. I don't need to figure too many things out. At the end of the month, I get paid. Show your passion and things like that. And sometimes I think for me, one of the biggest drivers, like one of the ventures I started, was just I just saw a gap, and I felt like nobody wants to address it. That's not right. I have what it takes to address it, and my partners had what it takes. And we're like, no, let's address it. Let's stop complaining. Let's be the solution. So that's how I saw entrepreneurship, as let's, solve problems. And that's how I've said it. Like, I'm solving a problem. Like, there's a gap here. We need people to do it. Rather than screaming around and telling everybody, why don't you do it? Like, do we have the ability to do it? And let's do it. Let's bridge the gap. So I love the fact, because sometimes people see like a two separate journeys. Oh, like you're in the corporate and you've been an entrepreneur. And I always try to correct and say, the skill sets as an entrepreneur are making me grow rapidly in the corporate world. Like one of the few first management jobs I had. And I personally believe I excelled at that role because I thought like an entrepreneur. And they call them corporate entrepreneurs. There's a word for them. Because I thought like a business owner. I was willing to be accountable, take responsibility, because I always told myself, if you were the owner of this business, what would you do? Yeah. And that would drive me. So you see, sometimes I would take a decision and people are like, why would you do this? It's not your company. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. Because when each of us are absolving ourselves like it's not a company, nobody wants to do what is right for the company. Because you feel like, at the end of the day, it's not my company. If anything could go bad, it's fine. It's them. Yeah. But this is where you get paid. This is where you show up every day. And this is where you're serving people. So pretend it's yours. Would you take those decisions? And you see, you show up like what you should really do. You really be truthful. So you tend to see that the skill sets overlap, and they're very, even as a corporate, learning structure, processes. I bring that back to the entrepreneurial world. When I run enterprises, we want to put structure because that gives us the ability to scale. Yes. Process helps fine tune. So you can also scale the business and be more efficient in providing solutions. So I feel there's some kind of mix, It's not like it's two narrow paths that they don't cross. There's a blend of skill sets.
People actually believe that the two shall never meet, and if you're an entrepreneur, then you cannot excel there, or vice versa. And I love the fact that you're looking at it as an entrepreneur and you're actually melding it and allowing it to work. Now it comes then to this. You talk about how your first two previous startups bombed and that they helped you grow. Let's talk about this a bit more. So what were these startups?
So people think, oh, I'm like, no, I feel you have to learn to feel forward. So I know when I first got my job, I'm like, I think I just start something small on the side. So at that time, because it was the start of the telco sector, the telcos just got their licenses. So they were getting a lot of distributors that have what they call business centers.
Right.
They're like centers that offer telco services to consumers. Okay. And I said, and initially it was thriving, because the demand was high. There was a pent-up demand. So, you get a lot of consumers come around. I couldn't sustain it because I was struggling with how to scale it,
Right.
What I learned is that, because then I realized, I wasn't just doing this because I want to have it written down somewhere that I have an enterprise to my name. I was doing it because I wanted to grow and make sure it's scalable and it can reach out and reach out to more people. And until I could figure out how to scale businesses, for me, it wasn't, even when it's a creative business, you still want to scale them. Because when you can scale them, you can reach more people. So I think that's one of the challenges I had with that because I couldn't scale it. I struggled and I, decided to shut it down. The second business I ran with a group of other partners, and it was really also thriving. And we started to scale it, So it was a retail chain, but we were specifically dealing with maternity retail. Like I told you, we found out we're all these women in the corporate world, and we figured out that each time we were pregnant, we were dreading to go to the office because we couldn't get an outfit to wear. You're dreaded, and sometimes you order. By the time maybe you order on Amazon or wherever, by the time they yes to you, you've grown bigger than the outfit. All kinds of, sometimes I tell people I was dreading meeting because I prepared this dress for the big meeting I'm going to have on Friday, which is the only one that looks really good. Like Thursday, I'm going to wing it. We're waiting for Friday. But it was tough because, you used a certain style. There's a certain brand you have created. And all of a sudden, that's how people first find out you're pregnant. They start seeing you show up in the office looking funny. Like, are you okay? You look ill. I'm like, no, it's just because this looks like a oversized outfit. I couldn't find my size in the shop, stuff like that. So we decided rather than, because we're always coming together and complaining to each other. Like, why are we complaining? Let's solve this. We are good at solving problems. So we started that venture and it grew. The online business became almost 70% of the business. Okay. We grew outside Nigeria, Cameroon. We were doing Cameroon, we were doing Ghana. So we were literally scaling the business. But then you tend to learn more that, it's more than scalability. I think one of the things we found that was, I think you need to be in business with people that share the same vision. I think we didn't. At some point, you're trying to scale, but your partners were not so keen to scale like you want. Operationally, we were challenged with getting right skill set because to scale, you need, because as you're growing, you need to put structures and processes in place, like I was talking about.
Yes.
You don't have to be there every day. If you're the owner and you have to show up every day in every store, there's a big problem. You have to have a structure and a process that allows the system to work, even without you being physically present. So that was a big struggle. And I couldn't give it a lot of time to really, we're looking for the right skill set. So all these things were coming, we're having issues. One of the big issues we also had was cost. We were struggling to manage our cost, and that was the model we ran. So the model we ran would have been more effective if we had reduced like the brick and mortar stores. Those be more with the business model and the planning, because we found out we couldn't control those costs,
Okay.
And this real estate companies would just double the
rates,
like annually. So your costs were growing astronomically. You didn't have, because they saw the traffic to the stores and said, these people are making so much money. So they just doubled, increasing our costs. And we couldn't increase the revenue as fast as that or increase our profitability as we were literally working for them. I think that's the bottom line.
Oh, wow.
So we look at the model. There were a lot of things. So at the end, you started this, but all those things, to be frank, I saw them as learnings because in my newer ventures, I thought about these things from scratch. I asked ourselves, so how are we going to scale this? Where are the cost drivers? How do you manage the cost? How do you ensure that the cost can be controlled? We don't want costs that we cannot control. That's definitely worth it, especially when you concede from the beginning. So you take those lessons and they make the newer ventures better, you see?
And these are powerful lessons. And most of us, especially, I will say this, and I say this hand in heart, is that we as women are so afraid of failing. We are so afraid of, being found lacking, that this fear actually will paralyze some of us from even starting, because like, I can't afford to fail. And
you can never tell how far if you don't try, if you don't show up.
And
so dumb, you probably won't even get there.
And the funny thing is, the greatest inventions this world has ever known all came out from failures. Big failures. The microwave, whether you love it or loathe it.
Light bulb.
The light bulb, popcorn. Weird things. Penicillin came from a failure because he was conducting an experiment, left something out. And that's how we have penicillin. So
I think it's all to do with perspective as well. You can change the way you see failure. If you see it as a tool rather than something that puts shame on you, it has a negative connotation to it.
Yes.
When we say, we feel that, doesn't mean that you're a failure. If you feel that something doesn't make you a failure. If you see it as a tool to learn, I think you would be less hard on yourself not to try, because it's okay to fail.
I think this needs to be taught in school.
Yes.
It needs to be taught in school.
Do you know, at a very young, and I think it's I don't know where we get those imbibed. It's quite amazing, because if you look at kids at a very young age, they're not risk averse. They're not afraid of failing. That's why they can walk, isn't it? They keep falling off the bed, off the table, but they're still going at it. Sometimes you're waiting, like, he just fell and he's not even crying. Like, he's not going to cry. He doesn't cry, he continues. So there's that innate ability to want to continue.
Yes.
But we as we get older, maybe shame, because then you're a bit more aware, like, oh, they laughed at me that I failed, or what people think about you.
I think it's a shame response because people laugh, but I also think is the way our educational system is now. And again, there's a bias that I'm going to put here, especially our African educational system that is so focused on, if you don't come first, second, or third, you are not worth anything.
And that's the only things we celebrate. The fact that you come first, like every other thing, no one is celebrating you.
Nobody cares. And if you are not in that first, second, and third, you are nothing. And you have teachers who will shame children. You will have teachers who, because a child doesn't get it, will shout. And I think that needs to be changed, and that needs to be re-examined, because that doesn't help the next generation. We need to be...
You saying this, Lillian, I just want to say that you're so right. I'll give you an example why I'm saying, because as you were saying that, it just hit me. I'm like, she's so right. I always tell people, like, especially I put that in my book as well, that, even though I'm an engineer, the first physics test I did, I got a 0.
Yeah, I read that. I was like, wow.
And that was a benchmark to decide my future. You could as well tell me, girl, just give this thing up. Don't even go dreaming about being an engineer. You just got a 0. But look at me today. I'm an engineer, even though I got a 0. So if we see differently, because it was just to give you the root shock that you have to work harder. You have to study more. You have to spend more time. This is an awakening. It doesn't mean that I was a failure. It was just trying to show me the amount of effort required to get to the milestone. That you have to, you still have to put more effort in. And for our kids as well, it will be so important, because just like what you said, when I was younger, our parents would tell us, oh, you have to get an A, or you have to be first. Because when I was younger, I used to be first. Every parents was first, got an A. You start to wonder who was failing in their own time.
Who was going home with those report cards?
Nobody was accepted. Now I tell the story to my kids, and I'm like, yeah, I failed. I got this. But you know what? I worked hard. And when you work hard, you can change it. And I think that story is more powerful, because it tells them you have the ability to change the circumstance.
Yes.
You have to accept it. It's not saying that that's the final, there's no other option. Because telling them that they have to always get an A or the first, like you said, is putting that pressure and making them be averse to even failing or trying. And failing for me is equal to innovation, creativity, growth. That's how you get better. You keep trying and trying and trying and trying.
Exactly. And this idea that we must be natural geniuses. So we will come back to that because I did so many other questions I want to ask you. We will come back to this concept around education and how we grow from failure. But what I want to talk to you, and you mentioned it, about the brand that you project. What makes you, because you're very consistent in terms of your branding and the brand you project. What makes you a standout brand?
I think, for me is when your branding doesn't require too much hard work because it ties into your core values.
Right.
I have to wake up every day and be somebody that I'm not. I think it's tougher. And that's the mistake some people do. You want to create a brand that doesn't tie into your core value. So it's so much hard work, isn't it?
It is.
It's like me waking up every day trying to be somebody I'm not. Like I really have to put on a whole different persona. I always keep it an eye, trying to make sure that everything aligns. It's so work. But once you have defined your core values, I know what you stand for, I think then it's easier to brand yourself because it's the perception of people. How do they perceive you? How does the community, others, businesses perceive you? But if you're consistent with your core message, like this is me and this is what I stand, this is what I know I am good and what I stand for. And if you keep doing it just becomes a brand of its own. People know that she won't do this.
Yeah.
Because that's consistent with her core. And I will say that I'll give you a little story about that. So initially when I first came onto social media, you're trying to figure it out. So I remember for one of my non-profits, I got like a social media expert to manage the platform.
Mm-hmm.
You put out some of these messages that were not consistent at all with what we stand for. Because that's how I used to tell them. That's not what we stand for. Oh, this is what will drive traffic. This is what will get people to the site and give you likes. This is how you get attention. And I'm like, after a while, we even had to let him go. I'm like, but that's not what we are trying to do. We're not here for the likes. We're not here for all that. Those could be the outcome of what we do, but that's not the driver. Because if that's the driver, then we can do some of those things you're talking about. But we can't do them because that's not the message you're saying. That's not the message, the core values we want to put out there. So we will keep putting our core values. If it's going to take 20 years or 30 years, whatever, it's okay. Because we know that we will reach the audience we want to. And that is what is more important. So I think he struggled because after a while, I think he just got tired because he really wanted to do some stuff. And I kept saying, no, you can't do that. We can't pull people down. We can't use those kind of negative, because that's not us. We say we want to promote women. We want to showcase women. We want to talk about their successes, not to pull them down, just because that will give you more attention or likes or create shock value. So that's for me. I think that's the simple way to wrap up that platform.
I do like that. And I like the fact that you are consistent with it. And the fact that you said, nope, this is not our value. This is not who we are. This is not how we show up. And it takes courage to do that because sometimes when you defer your power to somebody else, like, oh, I brought you in as the expert, so you know better. Some people will follow that route and say, yeah, okay, we'll just do it because it's what the experts suggest. And there's something about taking that courageous route to say, no.
Because you want to lead from the heart. You want to wake up and know that is very consistent with my core value to be a positive influence. If it's not positively influencing anyone, why am I doing it? Just because you want to get, the attention or the likes or the visibility. Because those outcomes could come, but it must come because we lived our core values, not the other way around. Not we're chasing those outcomes and ignore the core values. No, that's not how we want.
Okay. So one of the things you define yourself, and this is your own words, you define yourself as the consummate extrovert. Now, what advice would you give an introvert on leadership and actually growing their personal brand in the era of a socially media driven world that we live in right now?
So, I mentioned self-awareness. I think that's one of the good things about being aware of who you are, like your personality.
Yes.
But understanding that your personality doesn't necessarily decide if you're going to be a leader or not. You can be a leader as an introvert and extrovert. Your personality is just how you show up with some of your skill sets. But I always say, use what you've got. That's your strength. That's your power. Be authentic and true to yourself. So I, as an extrovert, will like the crowds, the people. I get my energy from that. You, as an introvert, probably don't like the crowds. That's not where you get your energy. You like your privacy. You're quiet. Then use that. And I learned that earlier on as a salesperson. As a salesperson, there's a perceived profile of who a salesperson is.
Yes.
They're extroverted, they're loud, and all that. Then with time, working with friends, I found out that some very good salespeople are not extroverts at all. They just know how to connect. They wouldn't do that in a large crowd. They'll probably do that one-on-one or in smaller groups because that's where they're comfortable to really, expose themselves.
Yes.
But they do it so well that it's effective. So being an introvert or an extrovert, I think what you really have to first decide for yourself is what you want to use it for. Because I see social media as a tool. Because what you want to use it for will decide how you will use it. If it's a tool to achieve something, then you see it as a tool. And you will not be carried away or be confused about why you're showing up on the platform. This is a tool to achieve this. So that it's like a knife, it's in a kitchen. I always use that analogy. In the hands of a woman that is cooking, is for chopping, is for cutting. Maybe if a bad guy like a robber shows up, an armed robber shows up in your house, the knife in his hand could be a tool for violence.
Yeah.
So it's a tool. What you want to do with the tool? You decide. The tool is not controlling you. You are controlling the tool. So decide. But then show up as your authentic self. It's okay. Who says you must show up every day and expose your feelings? If you don't feel, because some introverts don't want to do that. They don't want to pour out all their emotions or feelings. Then do what you're comfortable doing. It's your space. You decide. You control it. To say, no, this is what I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about this. This is not what I'm going to talk about. This is what I'll be talking about. And if you're interested in it, then we can be connected and you'll benefit from it. So for introverts, I would say do that. Just define what you want to use the tool for. Define what messages you're going to be putting out there. And you'll notice, because as you become more confident, then you can even take risk if you want to.
Yes.
It's something about taking baby steps, building trust, being more confident. Then you'll be comfortable to probably explore and take that other risk. But I think that's a good way to start. Don't put that pressure on yourself. You don't have to be somebody else. Be you. There will be somebody, an audience there for you. That's the important thing.
That's a very powerful statement there. Be you. And actually, I think it's been said so well, and you've said it so well, because if we're not ourselves, if we don't trust ourselves to show up as ourselves, nobody would trust us. No one would trust us. So you fascinate me, Jane, because like I said, you have the corporate side, you have the entrepreneurship, you're building and working with women. And one of your commitments is not just a value, I believe one of your commitments is women supporting and raising other women. And you started Women in Careers as a platform to do just that. So let's talk about Women in Careers and how it's supporting women in this time during this COVID period and beyond this.
So, like you said, I started with, because I thought one of the best things to do is to support other women, especially in my field where you have them as a minority.
Yes.
The best thing you can do is support them on that journey. Like in one of the pieces I wrote, I don't necessarily know all the answers, but I know I can support you. So that one I would do. So that's what Women and Career does. But in this times of uncertainty, it's even more important to do that, because the fact that we're uncertain of the times, some of us are anxious, scared about the future. That's the more reason you need each other. Yes. That's the more reason you need comfort, you need support. And who best to get it from? It's people that you can be yourself and vulnerable with and say, this is how
exactly.
And it's so important because, we show up to work these days. There's a thin line between the office and the home because it's one place. So we are being forced to bring all ourselves, especially as women.
Mm-hmm.
So I on a call, my son, my daughter, in the office, they don't show up. So you don't know if I have a kid. But now at home, they show up because it's time for lunch or their homework is due and they need me to do something about it. So you tend to see the other aspects of Jane. They're probably in the office. You never see or you never get exposed to. Mm-hmm. So, and I think for women, sometimes it's overwhelming in this time because you're running business, you're still having to do all these roles. That's the best time to get support. Sometimes you just need that time, self-care. Yes. And sometimes you need that time with people like you that understand. Mm-hmm. Because they can also share with you how they are coping. I remember in the early weeks of, this is something that happened to me. So in the early weeks of COVID, it was so overwhelming because now we're working from home remotely. My kids are schooling online. Yes. I just launched my book. I was trying to promote it and I stopped because literally the whole plan is not working because we can't really go out. Mm-hmm. I can't do socially distancing quarantine. I couldn't do anything. My plan was bent on the fact that I had to travel. I had to be in places physically. So it was a bit overwhelming trying to figure this out. So most mornings, like I'm still in my PJs, even in the evening from the morning, because I wake up and it's, dialing to meetings, make breakfast. My kids are doing work. I'm showing up there, helping them dial. You're like up and down the whole place. It was really overwhelming. I struggled so much. So I remember putting a call first. It was to my coach. She's a lady. So I was, as a side talk, like, this was happening to me. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to figure it out. It doesn't seem to be working. And she advised me, why don't you have a conversation with everybody in your house? Let them know how you feel, like you had with me. And maybe we'll see if everybody could chip on. Then I had this conversation with a friend of mine as well. Because I'm like, are you going through this also? Like, literally, I'm like the one doing the whole housework. I feel overwhelmed and the kids' homework and like I'm everywhere. And I feel like I'm nowhere. Like sometimes I don't even have a time to take a shower. And I want to take a shower because I want to lock the bathroom door and just be there having this quiet moment in the shower with my thoughts and, telling myself it's going to be okay. Don't be scared. It's going to be okay. So I think we talked about what she was doing and she gave me some tips. I'm like, I'll try that. Mm-hmm. So I got more ideas and I literally did that. So I had a conversation with my husband. I'm like, okay, the domestic work, we're going to and the funny, when you're that vulnerable and truthful about the situation, because sometimes people don't see it. Not that they don't want to help you. They didn't see it from that angle. Because you're being all superhuman. So now you're telling them this is the actual situation. Everybody wants to chip in. So my husband, my kids, everybody wanted to chip in. And that's how we distributed that and made sure that we are all going through this phase with some bit of balance so we can all cope. So, like you're saying, is for women, I think, so important because I'm sure if I had that conversation with a guy, I'm not saying guys are not good. He might not get it because probably for him, he's just in the corner of his house, which I see my colleagues do, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., having those phone calls. Halfway, somebody brings his lunch or bring him water. Or, he doesn't even have to.
He doesn't notice the rest of the chaos around.
If someone is mopping around him, cleaning the house, but he's okay. It doesn't have to focus on that. But my situation was slightly different because I'm the one worrying about nobody's made the beds. We haven't put out the trash. The dishes are still in the sink. All those things are going through your head. Like, but they're asking me for lunch. What are we going to have for lunch? And you're in a meeting, but you're trying to figure it all out.
Juggle everything. I like how you found your balance and I like the truth of it because there's some people like, oh no, this is totally fine. I can be the domestic goddess, the business goddess, the all at the same time. And then you are the exhausted person on the floor at the end of the day. So we can't afford that.
Yeah. So I think it's important. It's important. I say to women, that's why I say sometimes you have to dare to be bad. And just to decide, you can't do everything. These are the ones I can do. These ones, I'm not doing well. I'm not coping. I need help. You reach out and get help.
I think that's powerful. That's a message that, we should all take on board. When we need help, we get help. And this whole, we have to be super Wonder Women is something that we should leave in this lockdown phase. And then when we move out of lockdown, we work differently. Because I saw your article on what should remain.
Yes. And we could take that along, because if you notice, that's one thing I found interesting about men. If a guy showed up home and his son probably didn't do the work or didn't have lunch, most guys wouldn't feel guilty about it. But you will be reading with guilt. Oh, you guys haven't had lunch. You didn't do your. It's like
I'm a bad mother. I'm a bad mother.
You can't be everywhere. You already start judging yourself. You can't be everywhere at the same time. You just prioritize and decide. This ones I can address. This ones I can address. Where can I get help and support to address them?
And that's crucial. So let's talk about this. We've been skirting around your new book called Fearless. And I actually like the title. I love the book cover more. I just love the fire of that book cover. And if you look at it closely, you see kind of a lion appearing. What inspired the book? And then we'll also talk about the reasons why you went for that particular book cover.
So I always say that my daughter is actually the muse for the book. My daughter was definitely the muse for the book. It was a phase in my life. I was like mentoring other young women, but I was so passionate about wanting to share my experiences, but more importantly with my daughter.
Right.
But at that time she was like 3 or 4. She was very young. She had no clue what I'm talking about. But I really wanted to pass that on to her, because I thought she should learn these things. She should know these things. These are tools she can use in life as she grows up. So, of course, the best way to do it would be to document it. Mm-hmm. So the first title of the book was A Letter to My Daughter.
Aww.
That was the initial title when I started writing the book. It was a letter to my daughter. And my daughter is the metaphor for my younger self. Because it was all, what do you want to tell your younger self? If you had to do this, okay, what would you share with your younger self? And my younger self symbolic for my daughter, because you wanted her to know, so that in her own journey, she's equipped. You know that she's equipped to take on that journey. You're giving her the best you can by sharing those experiences. So that definitely was the inspiration for my book. And that's why when you were teasing about, I had an interview in Pigeon. Because I'm always thinking of the younger Jane. Where was the younger Jane located? What was the demographics? What did she speak? What was her environment like? So you want to reach those type of audiences, because you felt like this is a letter for that younger Jane. She needs to read it. She needs to know that I can see her.
Right.
And I have so much to share with her. So that for me was the inspiration for the book.
That is a beautiful inspiration. And I like it. I'm looking forward to getting a copy. And there's something about those lessons that we wish we had when we were coming up. And I think that is really important. And so what inspired the color and the cover? What was the inspiration for that?
I did lots of covers, lots of covers. Like the first few covers, you'd be like shocked. I'm like, that's not what I want. But I wanted something that could show really what I understood to be, what does it take to be fearless? What does it mean if you have to represent it as a color? And initially, I think the first few copies, the team came back with like a red book. And I'm like, why red is correct? I'm like, yeah, but red could also be far off, seen as dangerous, scary. But I want some color that is bold, out in your face. Because that's what sometimes it means to be visible, to be out there, to be courageous. Is that you're uncomfortable, but you're out there, you're not hiding. Doesn't mean that you're perfect. Doesn't mean that you've got it all figured or you're not scared, but you're out there. And that's why we chose those colors. You see the shade of orange and the yellow just right at the edge.
Yes.
We chose the lioness because it was symbolic for an animal that is known to be fearless. Why do they rule the jungle? People say that the roar of the lion sends you like running, like you haven't even seen makes you like to take up in a different direction. But that's because the lion is trying to take control.
Mm-hmm.
I want to believe sincerely the lions in the bottom of their heart could be also scared. I don't think they wake up every day like, we're not scared, we own this place. But they're wrong to do something, even though they feel like they have to fight for what they have.
Mm-hmm, exactly. I mean, look, a lion is actually afraid of the lionesses, and the lion is supposed to be the king of the jungle, and the lionesses are like, really?
Really. So I think that's what inspired the cover. There's a whole making sure that people know that, when we talk about being fearless, we're not saying that, first of all, it doesn't mean you're going to be belittling yourself, hiding out. It means that you're going to show up for those things you care about, show up for those things you're passionate about, even when you're uncomfortable. Like we said about being vulnerable. Doesn't mean it's not risky. It's actually very risky. If it's not risky, then that's not courage.
Yes.
Sometimes, and most times, you don't have control of the outcomes, but you're still going to do it. So I know the first picture that came to my head when we were trying to do the book cover, the picture on walls, not a picture, it's a sculpture on Wall Street, is of the bull, the raging bull on Wall Street. It's like a big bronze bull.
Yep, I know the bronze bull.
It was done in the 90s or so. But sometime, I think in the early 2000s, someone did a sculpture of a young girl, like in her pre-teens, with her on her waist, like Kimbo. And I told myself, this is so perfect to explain what I'm saying. Because this girl is standing in front of this bull. And we all know to stand in front of a bull, number one, takes a lot. Because there are no guarantees that bull is going to stop before it gets to you. It might actually charge through you and we can't find you, after that. But she's standing there in a pose that shows so much courage, like with her hands on her waist and staring. I say, people, most times you do those things we're talking about. Just because you're speaking up in the office or showing up at work and doing things doesn't mean that you're not scared and you're not going home and wondering, what did I just do? What did I just say? Will I get sacked? Why did I do this? She probably was sweating. Her palms were sweating. Her heart was racing, but she's still standing.
That's standing your ground.
That's the whole idea of the book. Be inspired to act. Even when you're scared and you can't control the outcome. Take the risk. Show up. That's how you change the world. That's how you live your dreams. It's the fact that you show up and you did something about it, even though it was really scary. Because if your dreams are not scary, maybe they're not big enough. So they will be scary. But are you going to do something about it?
That is so powerful. That is a good question. That's a good question. So, we should ask the people who are listening in, if your dreams are scary, are you willing to do something about it? Are you willing to step into that place to become the person to take on those dreams? That's powerful.
Really?
That's powerful. Now, I have been listening to a couple of podcasts that you've done. You've done one on the African Princesses podcast, which I thought was really yummy. There was another podcast you did, and I don't have the name to hand with me right now. And I was cracking up when you did this podcast because you did this entire podcast in Pidgin. So for everybody who is out on this side of the pond or anywhere else, I'm like, what is Pidgin? It's a variant of, it's a patois type language that is spoken in Nigeria. It is broken English. It's a dialect of English that is spoken in the African continent in different ways, in different guises. So in Jamaica and the Caribbean it's a patois, it's a Creole, it's a language in itself. And the reason why this is fascinating, because growing up as we did, we were not encouraged because you don't look educated.
Yeah. You don't look
polished. You're not polished, you're not proper. And that's why you still have some people where the command of the English language is not theirs, and they will refuse to speak in Pidgin, but they will do some very weird things and trying to sound like they are speaking the Queens. And you're like, hun, no, stop it, because you're going to hurt yourself and nobody can understand you.
That's true. So true.
And you did this entire podcast in Pidgin. So let's talk about that, because you said that your children were like, Mom, what were you doing? What were you saying?
I think there was actually a preview before that one. So when I just launched my book early in March, I was doing like a TV rounds where we're going to TV shows and talking about the book. So I should have been one of the media team at arranged an interview, and I had no clue. I just was to show up at a certain time. Right. So I showed up already. And I think just before I went on air, the producer like, oh, are you ready? This interview is in Pidgin. I'm like, Pidgin? They're like, they didn't tell you. I'm like, no, they didn't tell me, but I'm saying, it's okay, I'm fine. So I did that interview, and lots of people were really shocked watching it on air. Like, you speak Pidgin? I'm like, have you read the book? Do you know my history? Like, I grew up in the slums. That's what they speak. If I'm going to speak back to them, how best to do that? How best to share the story with them? Mm-hmm. So when this, it's actually a literacy group, they do book reviews and all that. When they had asked me to come on the platform, they were doing a review of the book and they wanted to interview me. Mm-hmm. But they said they would love to do it in Pidgin because they wanted to reach that audience. I thought it was so powerful, For me, I was so happy to do that. I was like, why didn't I think about this a long time ago? Because I told myself, if you were gonna speak to the young Jane, and lots of people like her living in the slums, you use a language that connects you. Because language is powerful.
Definitely.
There is a lot in it. Just the fact that we both speak the same language, you feel connected. Yes. I tend to trust you. I feel at ease, wanting to learn more, especially if you're in a place where everybody seems to be different. Mm-hmm. Once you hear someone speaking a language you can connect to, you just warm up to that.
Yes, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel acknowledged.
You feel heard. You drop the barriers because you feel like, oh, she gets it. I can be with her on the same platform. Mm-hmm. So I thought this was a powerful way to send that message to the slum, because initially I had my big plan on the book launch. I was going to do this, do that, but now I couldn't go there. Mm-hmm. What better way to do it was to make sure that they hear it in a language they can fully connect with. And they will know that, and they get to understand as well, that Jane was like you. And she could do it, why can't you? Yeah. Why can't you?
Because you're saying, I am you.
I am you, like I'm the younger you. So I'm telling you that if Jane could do it, you very much can do it. Don't be too judgmental. Don't be too hard on yourself. Just keep at it. And that for me is so profound. I'm like, I'm going to do it. Yes, I will do it. And I'm happy I did it. So when my kids had no clue because they can't speak Pidgin, they were a bit shocked because they heard me. Like after the interview, like, Mom, what was that? Who are you talking to? What are you speaking?
You tell them, no understand. We could not wait. No understand.
And I thought isn't it amazing that the next generation, because of almost the lifestyle we have given them, they're not exposed to that. So my kids never got really exposed to living in a slum or having access to that language. And I thought, it's an interesting thing. And I say that a lot, because one of the things I was battling with at some point was, how do I pass on my drive, my passion, or grit to the kids? Mm-hmm. Can it be taught? Can grit be taught? Because I know what was driving me as a young child, as a young Jane. You're being driven by the fact that you didn't want to live in that environment all your life. Yeah. You had big dreams. You wanted to aspire beyond your environment. So that was a driver. Especially because you were not comfortable. You didn't have the basics. Mm-hmm. Now you have these kids in a different environment. There's a lot of comfort. At least the basics are there. How can they be the best version of themselves? And how can they give the world what is actually in them? So you have to find out how do you create grit in that in this new environment so that they can persist and give off what is inside. So it's gets you thinking. I guess that's a discussion for another day.
That is definitely a discussion for another day. Jane, I cannot thank you for being on the show, because I still have loads of questions, and I definitely, what I'm going to do is to have you come back on, and we're going to have a second part to this conversation, because we haven't even touched the surface of our chat.
You told me not 40 questions. I was waiting for that.
We haven't, I looked at the time. I'm like, I can keep you for another hour. Your children might be hungry. That, they need to be fed. So what we'll do, we'll have you come back. But before you leave, I want you to share with me your so what and so loud moment, for the week as our first guest.
So my so loud moment, interesting, is going to Cher Jones. So Cher Jones is a social media strategist.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the profound things she did last week and this week, which I thought was so important, was using her platform to talk about the bigger issues. And for most of us, a lot of companies, enterprises, we find that to be too scary and risky to do. We all know what is going on, especially with...
Oh, Jane, I think we have lost you a second.
Oh, okay. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. So I said, for my shout out loud moment is going out to Cher Jones. Cher Jones is a social media strategist. She runs Just Ask Cher, where she helps organizations and brands with their social media strategy. But why I thought it was so good to celebrate her is what she did just this week.
Right.
She used her platform to put focus and talk about a bigger issue in the society, which is the thing we've all been aware of, which is the issue of racism and the social and the justice system in the US. Now, for most companies, most organizations, multinational corporates, we're always scared to talk about the social issues or bigger issues because they're uncomfortable.
Yes.
And, they're risky. We don't know how others will see it. We don't know how we'll be perceived. We don't want to dilute our brand.
Yes.
Cher had the courage to do that. And I thought that was so, so important. We are more than just a brand. We are humans at the end.
That's powerful. So big out to Cher as our first So Loud moment for 2020 for the show. So let's go offline very soon, because I want to arrange, before you escape, I want to arrange to get you back on the show, and we're going to talk more about the book. We're going to talk about all your personal experiences, because we haven't even touched on, we've touched on it slightly, of your experience of growing up in what you've described as a slum. For people that don't know, and for Nigerians who are in the diaspora who are listening right now, for Nigerians who are over in the UK and elsewhere, this woman I'm talking to grew up in Ajegunle. If you guys remember what that area was.
One of the lowest slums in Lagos.
This woman grew up in those areas where, like she says, the basics are hardly met, where the expectations are lower than low. And so the fact that you've come from there to where you are now, the fact that you are mentoring so many different people behind you is powerful. So I want to get you back on the show for us to have that conversation. And I'm looking forward to having you back.
I'll be honored to do that, Lillian. Definitely be an honor. Yes. I would look forward to it.
Awesome. Guys, I'm going to wrap up the session. Join us again for the next installment of having Jane Egerton. Please help me. I am determined to get your name right. Jane Egerton-Idehen on the show. She's going to be coming back and sharing her passion, sharing her journey to becoming fearless, which is a love letter to her daughter and also to her son and to her younger self, how she's balanced motherhood, her career, her life, and just doing it all. And actually, all the stories in between. So she's going to be coming back, and I'm looking forward to having her on the show. All right, folks, catch you later. Bye.
You've been listening to the Shine Out Loud Show. If you want to connect with us or let us know what you thought of today's show, be sure to follow us on Twitter @Shine Out Show.